what does good communication look like in a marriage?
If my wife speaks Chinese, I'm going to have to learn to speak Chinese. And
but
if he speaks Russian, I'm going to have to learn to speak Russian, even though it's not my language. Like, he lives in LA and she lives in New York and they're happily married. How could I trust you? If my own mother was never there for me. I know you for 3-4 years.
Why would you?
I grew up in Manhattan. So if I get pushed on the subway, but, I'm a city kid, like, whoa, dude, I push back. It's not traumatic. You're going to do keto and you're going to exercise every day and it's not going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
Potato giggle is going to happen. Okay, Tzaddik, you need to be in charge today.
Right.
I need to stay married to you so we can marry off our kids. You're satisfied, but he wanted more. Like, yeah, your wife made you a good supper and then you went to Muncie Takeout for a pastrami sandwich. Right. What's the shala? After
years of mistrust, after years of disconnect, what is your advice on how to rebuild? Okay, today we have on the podcast an expert guest. His name is Tzvi Tischler. He is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in all kinds of mental health. Today, what we're going to discuss is what a lot of people are afraid of. People don't like to discuss this subject, and this is about having open and honest communication with their spouse. Sometimes, things are getting messy. Sometimes intimacy is getting difficult to discuss. It's complicated, and the struggle is real. So what we want to discuss is when a person is feeling judged, when a person is feeling misunderstood. So, Tzvi, welcome to the struggle.
Thank you. Welcome to the struggle.
Well, yeah, this is a struggle. So now you're doing what you're doing.
So now I'm doing what I'm doing.
Excellent. And you enjoy it?
When, you know how good a parent you are after your kids have been out of the house for 20 years.
Yeah. So, that's when you see the result.
Yeah, so you know how good, it was Janina Fisher, but she told me that. But we know how good a therapist we are after a few years have gone by and treatment is long past, and we find out,
then you see the results. Then
we say, oh, wow, they're still married, and look, they have more kids. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I didn't realize what happened.
But while you're working, you don't see that so much.
It's hard because there's so much happening in the room. Let's say when I worked in St. Vincent's, it was nice because I would go in, punch in, deal with people with acute psychiatric illness, make those little connections. I'd go home, done.
Yeah.
But working in our community, it's never ending. I go to sleep thinking about people. I wake up thinking about people. Shabbos comes. It's even happened that people have knocked on my door in the middle of a Shabbos Suda, like getting a break.
Panicking, right?
Yeah, it's like it sucks the life out of you because if I was like a technician and you're here for EMDR, just sit right there, sir, and we'll do EMDR. I come to it as a connector and a compassionate person. So being the bleeding heart that I am, I have a hard time disconnecting, making a stop. And then so when I do, it for me it becomes harsh. So it's it's a balance that I've been trying to perfect over 15 years.
It's an inner balance.
Yeah. I'm a burnt out social worker. So do I enjoy it? Honestly, there are moments where the connection happens, and that two neshamas meet, or if it's a couple watching their two neshamas meet. Those are the rewarding moments that kind of give me gas to keep going through, but they don't happen every day.
Right.
They just don't.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question. As far as trauma goes, since you're an expert in this field, what is it that trauma has such an impact? So let's say if a child or a teenager is going through trauma, Now, let's define trauma. What is trauma?
The best way to define trauma would be where our normal faculties are overwhelmed, our fight, flight, freeze, submit are overwhelmed, and we perceive, because it's subjective, a threat to our well-being or life. So, if I'm in a car accident, it may not be traumatic. I may not perceive. My faculties work. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
I mean, in the studies of post-traumatic stress disorder, they did a lot of research over the years, obviously with military, because they're just, easy targets for stress, traumatic stress. And you'll find two people will be in the same experience, and one will come away with post-traumatic stress disorder and one won't. So it's a subjective experience. There has to be an overwhelmed thing that happens, meaning, so like if I get pushed on the subway, I grew up in Manhattan, so I think trauma, I think subway, right? So if I get pushed on the subway, but I'm a city kid, like, whoa, dude, I push back, it's not traumatic. But if my sweet little Rockland County raised children
who never saw this,
they'd be like, ah, right?
So for them it's traumatic,
right?
But what is more like mental, or let's say if a child loses a parent or a divorced, and they don't deal with this, they feel insecure, and people who are supposed to be there to protect them,
right,
or to confide in them, and it's missing. Is that a different type of trauma than physical trauma that you're talking about?
Trauma can come in all kinds of different ways. There's emotional trauma.
Right.
There's physical trauma.
Right.
There's body trauma. Like if I COVID, like it's traumatic because like I can't do things I was able to do 5 years ago. So trauma can come in all kinds of ways. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everything painful is traumatic. I mean, there's this like kind of misnomer. The word trauma is like so popular, it just gets thrown out.
Because someone had some pain or whatever, it was traumatized.
Right. Like like I didn't have enough money to pay for the groceries. It was trauma. Maybe, but probably not. It's just a uncomfortable situation.
Right. So what happens? Let's say the child goes through a trauma, a serious trauma, a serious situation in his life, and is it because they don't do anything with the trauma that just takes over their life, and it has an effect for the rest of their life and for the people around them?
Well, it's let's say what I found to be true, what I've read, is that traumatic experience can be mitigated by, like you started with healthy attachment. So what I found over the years is that children are now, late adolescents, young adults who have been molested. But the people who are the most affected are the people who don't have that warm, healthy attachment. People who have a healthy attachment go through, either they don't come to therapy or they go through the therapy work much, much quicker. So,
when you say attachment, what do you mean? To the parents, or if they have a healthy relationship,
somebody to go to that is going to get them, understand them, see them, hear them, understand them. I mean, that's the acronym I like to use.
Right.
SHU, right? That's a good way to remember it. People want to be seen, heard, and understood. And if I go to Cheder and I got in a fight with a friend of mine, and I not anymore, he's my enemy now. And then I come home and I come home and mommy gives me milk and cookies, and I sit and I cry about it, and she tells me, oh, it was such a hard thing. It's over. Yeah. It's over. It's you don't have to go do EMDR on it 20 years later.
Right, because she was seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah, because somebody was there. But when I come home and, on the adult attachment interview, one of those questions is, when hard things would happen or bad stuff would happen when you were a kid, who would you go to? Right. More often than not, in the most traumatic, people with most, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, they'll say, nobody. I wouldn't go to anybody. And that's why they're in my office, because there was nobody to go to. I have to kind of help them learn how to replace that voice that was never there, and they sort of have to start doing it for themselves, doing it for other people, and then it's going to heal itself.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that if a child or a teenager
Or
an adult was not seen, heard, or understood, that will have a tremendous effect.
Yeah.
So how many people, what percentage of people who you deal with were not seen, heard, and understood?
Well, because I have a select group,
Right.
I have people coming for therapy,
Looking for
trauma
help.
therapy.
So you see a lot of people.
So the majority, 80, 90% of people that I work with weren't seen, heard, and understood as kids.
So give me an example of a child or teenager or an adult who talks about their childhood, who are living in, with parents, and they still did not feel seen, heard, and understood.
Okay. Well, let me start with a good story, and then I'll give you a bad story.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good story is Bacher Hassan came to me. He was scared out of his wits. He was getting married in 6 months, and he didn't want to have children. They're like that whole parsha, like they ripped those pages right out of the book.
What was behind that? I mean, he wanted to get married.
He wanted to get married, but the whole idea of going into a bedroom and taking off his clothes and that.
Oh, you mean that part, the intimacy part? Yeah.
So in the attachment work that we did at the beginning, I learned that his parents are super supportive, loving, caring. If he had a hard day, he could go to them and they would take care of it.
Correct.
He was raped, molested, whatever you want to call it, in a mikvah.
Mm-hmm.
And he, since then, he was in the whole parsha of...
that was not his field.
Not his thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we did some work on a fight he had seen as a kid and this and that, just a little bit. And then we did, EMDR on the memory of that. And then we kind of did some more work after that. And the whole therapy process, till he felt like he had met his goals, it took about 9-10 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I met him on the street maybe a year or two while later, and he goes, "Tzvi, I just had a baby." I was like, "Wow, unbelievable," and I said, "What?" I said, "Can I just ask, what was?" Because I forgot part of the story. The more important part of the story is while we were doing EMDR, he remembered that he had totally forgotten about this. After it happened, he went and told his father what happened.
Right.
And his father went to the Vadatznias, and the Vadatznias kicked the guys out of KJ, and like he felt like he had somebody there for him. Mm-hmm. So I said, "What happened?" I said, "I realized, even if bad stuff happens to me, there are people that I can go to."
Right.
And it was just I'm gonna say that's 10 years ago that this story happened. That I met this person, and it was just a light bulb that kind of went off. Oh wow, look at that. On the other hand, bad story. Yesterday, yesterday, I was working with a German, and he doesn't have, what as an outside observer sounds like a major traumatic story. He wasn't molested, he wasn't beaten. It sounds like it's pretty good, except the loneliness that he's felt all his life, that nobody's ever cared for him. The only time people want to look his way is when they want to judge him.
Or when they need something.
Or they need him, more like not something, but need him to do something for them.
For them, yeah.
Right. So then he is really, really struggling. He's really sitting in his shame and his brokenness and his loneliness. To talk to his wife was like pulling teeth, to tell him, to ask her, it's like to ask her to make something he'd like for dinner was like, I can't ask her, because he's just, the rejection levels are just like, I can't ask for a cup of water. She's going to say no.
Right. So he never felt that he deserves it because that's what he was catered to all his life. I mean, he was, that's what he knew, that's where he's comfortable.
Yeah, he was never seen, heard, understood. So helping him learn that he can be seen and heard, understood. We had to bring her in. She comes every third session now, and kind of learns how he can learn how and to see and
Communicate.
reattach. Yeah, and he's, as a father, he's learning to see and hear his kids, which is really what the attachment people are saying now, is that that's really the best way to heal attachment is through parenting. Because we're not just parenting our inner child, fancy word there, but we're parenting actual people, and we're saying, "Hey, look how that kid, my kid, feels when I ask him how his day is, when I give him a hug, when I give him one more hug before he goes to sleep, and one more hug, right? And then I make that boundary. That's not a punitive no, but a comfortable, safe.
Right. So what you're saying is that people. When you use the word attachment, is people conduct their lives the way they were taught, the way they were brought up, correct? If they had a certain attachment, a good or a bad attachment issues, they will duplicate. They would emulate that later in life, correct?
Yeah.
Because this is what that's all they know.
Right. So it's sort of like this multi-generational dysfunction.
Right.
Right.
And the job is to break that cycle.
Yeah.
Break the attachment style that this person is used to.
Right. That's the kind of the work of of the person.
Right. So how does a person find out? Does he only find out that there's attachment issues when the spouse tells him or the children tells him? Because how would he find out that his style of attachment is not the way it's supposed to be?
You don't need a spouse to tell you you're lonely.
Correct.
Right. You don't need a spouse to tell you that you've been running away from people, from drugs to drugs and alcohol or whatever.
Right.
Instead of connecting to people. You need some kind of like lights to go on. And very often it's a spouse.
Right.
Or sometimes it'll be even grown children.
Right.
Sometimes it'll be you'll find yourself, passed out on the floor of some unknown building.
Right.
And you realize like, wow, how alone am I? So for everybody that that moment is different.
Yeah, you have to examine it. So the question is, what does good communication look like in a marriage?
When both parties are, when the husband and wife can feel like whatever I'm saying is heard and I'm not being judged. When if I have a problem, I'm not pushing it, blaming it on you. When you have a problem, you're not blaming me, but it becomes our problem. When I'm open to discuss things instead of lecture. When I'm open to hear what your perspective is, and you're open to hear my perspective.
Right. Basically, not feeling judged and not feeling ashamed to share.
Yeah. When I'm certain that I'm going to be seen and heard and understood, and I'm ready to do that also.
Both have to be ready to do that, and which means that you don't have to think before sharing. You don't have to.
Well, you probably should.
You should think before sharing. But the idea is, you be comfortable enough to unpack things that you felt like I'm not going to share this because it's judgment is going to come.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So I'm not gonna come into the room and say, you always leave your dirty socks on my pillow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I would come and say, it bothers me that there's always dirty socks on my pillow. Can you help me? And my wife was gonna say, oh sure, I didn't know dirty socks on your pillow was gross for you. No problem. Right. Yeah. That's like
right. So there's a way how to bring it in.
Yeah, but it's not like if I mention the dirty socks on my pillow, she's going to feel like I hate her, she's not a good wife, and then I better not say it, and I better just sleep with the smelly pillow and just be quiet.
Right. Is it a self-esteem thing that a person is avoiding these confronting?
Well, I guess the attachment struggle boils down to how I feel about myself.
Right.
Right. So yeah, self-esteem. People say like it's a self-esteem problem. I always like to think of self-esteem as a symptom of a hurt, of a hurt or a wound. Yeah.
Right. So why do couples avoid a conversation about, let's say, intimacy? I mean, even if they'll talk about sex, it's easier, and food is easier to talk about. When it comes to intimacy, I find, and I speak to people, that they avoid the conversation. It's just very awkward for them. They don't want to go there. She will not understand, and this is in healthy, pretty much healthy marriages, and this is a subject that they just try to avoid all the time.
Right. Why do people do that? I would assume it's cultural. We live in a Western society, Western European influenced society, where Puritan ideas, the bedroom,
right,
the bedroom
was taboo, was something that we didn't go there.
Right. So,
but even a couple who is living together, it's supposed to be like open and honest and.
Right. So it depends on how I feel about my own sexuality. Right. How was I introduced to sexuality?
Right.
More often than not, I work with mostly men, so that's my perspective. Right. So more often than not, not just the Haredi world, even into the secular world,
right.
Especially, I guess, at this point, boys are introduced to sexuality through, now it's the internet. When I was growing up, it was through magazines, right? Innate human sense of shame, but not in the negative way. Just like this, what we would call tsanua perspective,
right?
And
because there are certain things that people feel that doesn't belong to. I mean, it is definitely a tznius issue, and it's a private thing. But they take it to the next level. They don't even discuss it with who they're supposed to discuss it.
Right.
And sometimes it's not against halacha, or it's not against anything else. It's what the Rebbeinu Shalom gave. Right. Part of life. Right. And it's a subject that is like very difficult from both sides of the aisle sometimes to discuss.
Bothers them.
What bothers them, correct?
And then
so it's confusing.
It's so confusing.
And there's no education about the subject. Nobody's talking about it. I mean, a lot of parents don't. There used to be, I don't know what, but they never discussed the subject, and these kids were just, till they were 18, 19, whatever. They're learning on their own.
Right. Well, I mean, people tell me, and I'm just shocked. Like there are people that sexuality just doesn't enter their radar until they're the Chassan Rebbe or the Kala teacher.
Yeah, there is communities like that because they shelter the kids.
I wouldn't say communities, and I wouldn't say sheltered kids, because you can have two kids from the same family. One was well informed. All he had to do was look at Rashi.
Rashi or Rashi, a friend, this or that. Some doing some. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some. Right. There's some kids that are they're so inquisitive. Hey, Rebbe, why'd we skip that?
Right.
Right. Or what's this business with Yehud and Tamar? What's this dash b'fnei Zorei b'chutz? They're asking.
Right. Curious.
When my son now, who's 21, he's a chassan. When he was, he had to be before bar mitzvah, and he was learning Mishnah. He goes, Tati, what's nida?
Right.
What's zav? And because these are words, can you teach it for me? So here I'm. Do I tell him what it is, or do I do the party line? What do I do? Right. My oldest kid, I don't know what to do.
Right.
So I said it's a kind of tumah. I was sitting in shul. I was sitting next to somebody who was like a big mechanech, right? So I asked, "What do I do?" He said, "Just tell him it's tumah." Okay, it's a tumah.
Right.
Okay, and now it's a tumah. Zav is a tumah. Keri is a tumah.
Right.
Whoa, what else is tumah? Rats are tumah. So now sexuality, when when I find out what nida actually is,
Right.
I'm equating it with tuma.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Right? Okay, so if we just, I mean, it is a tuma and it is, but it's not like tsaras,
Right.
right? It's not
Right.
like you did something wrong, so now you have you said lashon hara,
Right.
now
Right.
you have to go
Right.
out the machna.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
not. It just happens because we're humans.
So you're just saying it's the culture, it's the way we.
But at the same time, we're kind of stuck because it's for a good reason, because there are people out there who have bad intent.
Right.
And we do need to protect our kids. And we don't want to open them up to the entire world of sexuality, because at 9, 10, 11, they don't need it. It's not part of.
It's not their time right now.
It's not their time. When kids, and there are svarim coming out lately. I think one's called Boys to Men or something like that. In the Litvish world, there's things happening. There's another sefer put out in Eretz Yisrael. There is a shift. Like, they need to be informed that they're not bad.
Yeah.
And that's a gift from Shemayim. Yeah, because it is. I mean, we have to admit it. It is a touchy subject.
Right.
When you're learning about it.
Right.
Once you enter the marriage situation,
Right.
let's put it this way: if I can't be emotionally and intellectually intimate with you, how can I be physically intimate with you? Which is a problem,
Right.
right? Because physical intimacy, in an ideal way, is a progression from that emotional intimacy.
Right.
Right.
So what you're saying is you have to be emotionally connected before you're physically connected.
Have tos? There's no have tos. In an ideal way, right? In a lust-driven world,
Right.
I don't need to even know your name. But in a wholesome, connected way, right? Right.
So what you're saying is that when a person is dating, that's where the emotional connection starts, and then they move into because they date for what? For 3 months, for 6 months?
Well, it depends who, right? So if it's a big show, it's like 30 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. So where's the emotional connection when there?
Would I expect, a new chassan and kala to be able to talk about, physical intimacy? They can't even think about it. Just like we would hope for an emotional relationship to build, we would also hope for a physical relationship to build and an open relationship to build.
Now, how does unresolved emotions and trauma show up in intimacy?
Let's put it this way: if I'm emotionally triggered, right, I'm gonna one of my automatic defense mechanisms, one of my parts, if you want to call them parts, is going to take over. I usually kind of follow a more open idea of parts. I don't IFS, whatever, and I mean, parts work has been around since way before Dick Schwartz was even born. I mean, so we can't let him totally steal parts work. So we're not going to.
Right.
I usually follow Janina Fisher, who's a trauma specialist. She has something called TIST, and it's much more simple. We have a fight response, a flight response. Well, let's say it like this: there's our getting along with normal life brain. That's what we're using right now.
Right.
And then we have our trauma brain. When the trauma brain turns on, then there's no information crossing over the midline to the prefrontal cortex, and we actually aren't thinking. We're reacting. So we're using only part of our head, part of our mind.
Right.
So we're using our automatic systems of fight, flight, freeze, submit, and that other part, which is sort of a cry out for help, needy part, which is really the other side of the coin of a flight part. So, if I've heard this like way too many times, it's kind of sad, but sex addicts will often have the hardest day, or their worst day of the month is when their wife goes to the mikveh. You'd imagine if he's a sex addict, he's gonna be like raring to go, but because it's not just a one and done. He knows that he's going to have to look at this person in the face. And that's really scary for him. So he's going to act out. He's going to run away when that intimacy shows, because that is the most uncomfortable thing for him. So he's going to turn on his flight part, right? He's going to turn on, it'll happen, right? So even if he didn't act out and run to wherever he's going to run, once he gets into the bedroom, he's either in this withdrawn state, or he can even be in a fight state, or he can be in a freeze state, or he can be in a needy state, or a submissive state. So he's not going to be with his getting along with normal life, connecting, emotionally intimate self as he looks his wife in the face, because that's just going to totally blow his fuses.
Why is that he gets so in flight mode when
one of the trauma states? Why is that? Because he's being triggered. Connection scares the pants off of him, literally. Right? Connection is a scary thing. And now if I grew up in ways, back to the attachment story, if I grew up in ways that the people that I was most I would want to be most connected to were never there, or even worse, were harmful to me, well, that's gonna get triggered as I step in, across the threshold to the bedroom.
So those people are afraid of connection. I mean, the connection is what they were missing. And when it comes to healthy connection, they get into flight mode. Is that it?
Or their trauma brain's gonna turn on, because although they so badly want connection,
they need connection. That's the reason for them running around, right?
Right, exactly.
But when they have it,
it scares them. It's scary, because
it's foreign to them.
How could I trust you if my own mother was never there for me? Right? I'm the first of 12, let's say. I'm thinking of a certain person. And by the time I was 3, there was already one and another one on the way. And I was pretty much ignored from 3 till now. And you, lady, I've met, I know you for 3-4 years. I know my mother. My mother never took care of me. She was never there.
So why would you?
So why would you be? Yeah, I want connection, but I'm going to have a fantasy connection. Right? I'm gonna go use, I'm gonna use pornography as a fantasy, or whatever I can, tell myself in my head.
What you're saying is very profound. What you're saying is that if someone was traumatized, they had a disconnect with the parents, or whatever the reason is, divorce or something,
or a loss of a parent.
And that child learned at a very young age that nobody loves me, or whatever the case is. And they, right there and then, they lost trust. 100% lost trust in everyone, in everybody. Now, when they get involved in relationships, people want to love them, but they don't let you love them. They don't let you in because they don't trust the soul. Because they never knew, they never felt, they never had the people who they were supposed to trust. They never felt it. So what they do is, the problem is that they don't trust. So there are people who want to love them and trust, build a trust with them, but they don't let you.
Right. So you're kind of talking about like a detached attachment scenario where, he lives in LA and she lives in New York and they're happily married.
Right.
Right. That's that kind of scenario. What would be horrible is if, he's the kind of person, or she's the kind of person that never trusted a soul and never will, because they've decided for whatever reason, and they're married to somebody who's trying so hard. So every time, let's say a wife comes, a husband takes another step, and and so it's like this endless pursuit until eventually she says, "Forget it, I'm out of here." He's not, and then he's like, "Hey, where'd you go? You're supposed to be here." Right? Or in another way to do it. Excuse my little hand puppets. Right? There's an ambivalent attachment where it's like, sometimes here, sometimes not. Like, so when mommy says to the kid, "Hey kid, I want to go play on the swings," and the kid's like, "Are you good, mommy? Or are you bad, mommy? Are you going to start playing on the swings with me and then take a phone call? Because if you are, I don't want to. Because if you're going to be I'm on the swings. So I'm not sure who you are." And those are most of us seem to get that kind of dysfunction.
Right.
Where, like, I'm not sure if you're there, you're not sure if I'm there, and then sometimes we're attached together and sometimes we're not. Sometimes one's pursuing, sometimes the other's pursuing, and that makes the messiest sort of
Right.
mix.
How can a spouse deal with the other spouse who completely lost trust in everyone, doesn't trust the world, feels that the entire world is guilty, and there's no, is stuck in his mind? And how can the spouse deal with this other one to have some, build a relationship with a person like that?
It's very hard. What helps is again, let's talk about, either detached or attached. It's not over attaching and it's not under attaching. It's sort of like, I'm here. Like if you think about it with your kids, it's kind of easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So teenagers, they're always a party, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're, how can you connect with your teenager? Let's make it a little bit more simple, right? So
Right.
since I'm the attachment figure, I'm the father, and he's my 16-year-old. So I'm gonna say, here's a good one, shul, right? Shul, fathers and sons, especially teenagers, watch any shul you go to. It gets messy, right? You either see the kid not there, or in the back,
Right.
or sitting next to the father shaking like the father
Right.
shakes, right? There's like, what you kind of want to see is like sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not, because he's a teenager. He's trying to figure it out. But Tati stays Tati,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're here, I'm right here by my stender. And if you're not here, guess what? I'm also here by my stender. I'm here when you're ready. I'm not going anywhere. You can go there, you can come back. You can be on the roof, you can be in the basement.
Right.
But I'm here. I'm here. My expectations haven't changed. My love for you doesn't change. If you want to come in with, with sneakers today or a chup or, bright orange glasses, I'm still here. I'm the same guy that you knew when you came in with black glasses and a 000.
Yeah. Right.
That's the job of the attachment figure, to remain solid and attached.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's with a wife, right? Okay, lady, you're gonna go nuts and bananas and run out and go to your mother and cry. I'm still here. In fact, I'm gonna make dinner and I'll set 2 places, one for me and one for you in case you want to come back.
Right.
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 I'm not playing your roller coaster game.
Right.
I love you. I'm here.
Right. Right. Yeah. What are some red flags that signals in a marriage that there is a disconnect?
Loneliness.
That means if one of them feel that they're not secure, they feel that
if I'm insecure, I'm lonely. If I feel like there's nobody to talk to, or if I feel smothered, I feel like this person's like, they need me, so like they always need it, calling me. They need me. They need me to make decisions for them. They need me to hold their hand. Because that's, remember we spoke about fight and flight a little bit, but there's also that needy part, right? That needy part is like, if you think about when you put your little kids to sleep, right? First they're gonna fight you. No, 5 more minutes, right? And then and then they're gonna try and run, right? Like they're getting like a 3-year-old in pajamas is like, handling a slippery fish. And then finally after, the half an hour of struggle where you had to become a samurai warrior and you get that little thing into bed, and then all of a sudden they're hungry. They need a drink. They need one more hug. Could you just leave a light on? Can you check on me for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you lie down next to me? Can we say Shema again? Did we say Shema? I think we need to say Shema again, right? That's that needy part showing up, because fight is useless, flight is useless. Right. They're not ready to give up, so that it gets that needy. So it shows up in marriage also, right? Like, I'm going to get in a fight with my wife, and I'm going to be upset at her. She'll be upset at me. And then she'll do her dysfunction attachment. And then all of a sudden, I just want her to like me again. Can I do the dishes for you? shut up, go away. Right?
Yeah.
But what could like? So I'm going to drop the whole argument and do whatever it takes to get to this person to give me attention, even though she's upset, and probably rightly so, because that's how it works.
Yeah.
Right? Then there's I'm going to do what it takes to get that person back, and that's that needy function.
Yeah. So that's neediness and loneliness. There are certain things that is just that builds disconnect.
Right.
And you can spot that very easily. What are some practical tools that couples can use when they're feeling unheard, unseen, and misunderstood?
Keeping in mind the sha.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
Right.
if my wife is upset at me for anything, if I go into defense, I'm just gonna make it harder. So if somebody's upset at me, the best thing I can do is see them, hear them, understand them. And after that person, well, let's say my wife, is seen and heard and understood, then I can say, hey, are you open to hearing what it's like for me?
Like my side of the story.
Yeah. And if she isn't, okay, it's not the time. Maybe next week. If she is, then I talk about, well, the way I perceived that, the way I experienced it in my magical Demionis world. This is what happened. And then she can see and hear and understand me. And then Shalom al Yisrael. But that's a starting point, to see and hear and understand.
Wow. So that's good to remember. SHU, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. What percentage do you see when couples come to you after marriage? What is the biggest percentage of arguments? Is it just what are they arguing about? Is it what percentage is intimacy and what percentage is just regular life?
Even when I work with couples that are in sex addiction, and there's a certain taboo that they're very reluctant to talk about the intimacy problem. But any and every other problem, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't, when people are uncomfortable with each other, it doesn't matter what the problem is. It could be how you put your toothpaste away.
Right.
Or it could be what you said to my mother.
Right.
Or it could be, how you handled the kids. But it doesn't really matter. It's that I'm not comfortable with you, and I'm not giving you the space to be you.
So what you're saying is that even this is a huge problem, they're not even going to discuss it with a professional.
I don't, I only know what I see. I don't know
Right.
what I don't see.
Yeah.
I know that, in our world, it's like, when stuff gets really, really, really bad,
Right.
it's got to get to a really bad level for you to consider getting a shlish, right? Then you make it to a Rav.
Right.
And the Rav will try to handle it for a while.
Yeah.
Sometimes Rebbeim can help and sometimes not.
Right.
And then he'll send you to an askin,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right? And then they can handle it, maybe they can't.
Right.
And then when it finally, when somebody mentions like based in, you got to see a therapist now.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. This is the last resort, is what you're saying, before Bezin?
I not always, but
Yeah.
plenty. Or,
Right.
Or if, somebody catches the other person, cheating,
Right.
or using,
Right.
the internet.
Yeah.
Then, okay, so then we're gonna bypass it. We need a good therapist, right?
Right. Right. So how do you differentiate between emotional honesty, if someone wants to share with the wife, and unloading, like emotions, which you become a drag, you're like sharing too much and you're actually bringing the house down, it becomes negative. Where's the fine line between the two? A person says, yeah, I want to share, and who else should I share with? And then the other person is being brought down.
So if it's coming from the prefrontal cortex, getting along with normal life, I feel it, I'm thinking, I'm not blended, I'm not in a trauma state, I'm calm, cool, collected. I can either share with you, or I can go, learn with my chavrusa. If you have, then we can do it. But if I'm unloading, it's usually going to come from either a fight place or that needy place. and it's going to be emotionally, vomitocious.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
not going to be a productive conversation.
Right. It's also is it the tone of voice, or is it the type of things that you're saying, the way you say it?
You know, it could be a tone of voice, but some people are like computers. They can emotionally, as much as they can, unload in a calm, cool, collected voice. So it's gonna be, for me, the unloader, I'm gonna have to notice where am I, where am I really holding? Am I centered? If I'm centered, great. I mean, ask an alcoholic if he can drive,
Right.
Yeah, I could drive, no problem. And ask an emotionally distressed person if they're emotionally distressed. I'm not emotionally distressed.
So he has nothing to say. Yeah.
Right. So, but a person, if they're honest with themselves, they'll know if they're,
Which place this is coming from?
yeah, if it's coming from the needy state, then it's not sharing, it's unloading.
Right. And after years of mistrust, after years of disconnect and neglect, and a couple wants to rebuild. This is after a lot of years. What is your advice on how to start to rebuild?
It takes time. If we can just put it in a physical way, imagine like you've been neglecting your body and now you're in your 50s. How do you get in shape?
Right.
Well, you're going to do keto and you're going to exercise every day, and it's not going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
Potato kickle is going to happen. That's what's going to happen. So you want to build it in stages. You want to go slow. You want to make time, and know that the rebuild isn't going to happen real fast.
In one day, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to take time, and we're going to grow. And I heard, I think, in the name of Rav Palm or Reisman, one of that kind of chevra, they said, "Achoisi, rayasi, yoinasi, samasi." Like marriage, it comes in stages. So when you first get into it, it's like a free love, achoisi. Yeah, he's my brother, he's my sister. Just that's how we are.
Right.
Of course, we're together. Achoisi, rayasi, and then we become companions. We do stuff together. We work together well. We raise their kids together, rayasi, and it's happening. I'm slow. Yonasi, and then
these are the steps.
Yeah, and then there's Yonasi. It's a commitment, and we're building our commitment. And then Samasi, imagine at that stage when we're one unit, but that takes time to build, and it's not going to happen in Sheva Brachas, and it's probably not going to happen in the first 10 years.
Right. It's a long-term thing. Now, what is your advice about checking in regularly with the other's emotional needs?
So there are a lot of different tools to use. There's something called Fanos, which 12-steppers like to use. It's like a daily check-in.
When would you do? When is the time for that? When is some advice of how to? Is it once a month, every 2 weeks, or every day?
Well, it depends. Daily is wonderful. Ideally, like if you don't want to get a cold, take vitamin C every day. Right. If you want your relationship to grow, work on it every day.
Right. So give us an example of a check-in, like.
The one I like to use most comes from a couple's thing called pairs. I kind of adapted it because if I would use theirs, I'd have to pay them like $120 every time I mention it. So it's not theirs, but it's similar.
Okay.
It's called the temperature reading. So it's like a daily check-in. I call it the daily dose.
Right.
Where first thing you do is you say an appreciation. So let me just kind of back it up a second. It should take 3 minutes, 5 minutes the most. And on, let's say, Sunday, I'm the speaker and my wife is the listener. Monday, my wife is the speaker, I'm the listener. And it's not a conversation. It's just a check-in. I'm just giving you what's going on for me. So first I'd appreciate something about you. I'd say, "Oh, wife, that was so nice the way you I watched you put the 3-year-old to sleep last night, and it looked so cozy, and I just appreciated watching that." And then she can say, "Oh, thank you." Right. And then the most important part, complaints with requests for change, where I'm not just going to kvetch,
right.
Like dinner's always burnt. Right.
Right.
I'm going to give a real complaint with a request for change. It bothers me that, and it's going to be about me, my preference, not what's wrong or right.
Right.
It kind of bothers me that, that I need to eat dinner at 6:30 because I have a charusa at 7:30. So it bothers me that dinner's never ready till 7:15. Could you please help me out and
Right.
do me a favor and see if we can get dinner at 6:30? And then she can say, oh, here, it makes it kind of rushed for you to get it, to have dinner at 7:15. Okay, I can see if we can do that. And then you do, then I always forget the order, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Those are the two main parts.
Right.
Then we talk about just wondering. I was just wondering, you mentioned that you wanted to go to your mother for Shabbos. Are you still thinking about it? You don't have to answer now, just wondering. And then new information where it's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, so-and-so got engaged. Or it's, oh, new information, guess what? I won the lottery.
Yeah.
Right, just something new that you haven't told her yet or him yet.
Right.
And then it's always nice to share wishes, hopes, and dreams. Because it's another way just to I was thinking today while I was driving home from work, wouldn't it be wonderful if we can go away this summer with the kids? Or it could be, I dream one day that we're going to have a house in the old city in Yerushalayim and be the old couple that kind of feeds the pigeons there.
Right. But do you feel that helps a lot? This is like a routine that is like...
When people do it,
it has to come from a good place, so it's not a performance, It has to come from a real...
Well, it's going to be a performance. It's going to be uncomfortable and performance-like.
At the beginning, what you're saying.
Yeah, I just rattled it off because I'm rattling it off for years.
Right.
But at the beginning, it's going to be awkward and it's going to be uncomfortable. But a couple of years ago, I bumped into one of the parts of a couple that I'd seen many, many years ago, and they said, we still do the daily dose, and it's so helpful. I was like, hey, great.
Wow.
So it's
and it works for them.
If you do it like vitamins, like vitamins don't do anything if they stay in the shelf, in the cupboard, right? But if you take vitamins every day, yeah, you probably won't get a cold.
Yeah, wow.
Doesn't mean you won't get a cold, but your immune system will be stronger. So that's what these kind of things are.
So what happens if one spouse doesn't cooperate? Let's say that it's such an ungrateful spouse. And it's just, you're trying your best. I'm trying to do this. I'm going to do the daily dose. But the other person is like, this sounds to me like a bunch of, what do you do then?
You got a problem. You got a problem.
We have a problem.
Yeah. And then it's like, it's not, let's say it's not his problem that he's not interested. It's now becomes our problem.
Correct. And
so so my question for me as the wife in that situation is, how do I want to show up to our problem? Right? I can go and complain to every Rav and therapist in my city and say, it's his fault.
Right.
But that's not going to get me anywhere.
No. Now, what if a spouse deals with a significant other, another spouse, that is emotionally arrested? Literally a person who shut their feelings off completely because, like we said before, trust issues, and it's just no feelings whatsoever. Understand why? Because the pain is bigger to deal with the emotions than to shut off the feelings. Right. How does a spouse go about that?
With patience. I just last night I had a couple. They're in their 50s. And he is like, shut down. He's a man's man. He carries a gun.
Right. Macho.
He carries a gun and the whole thing. And she is like
full of emotions.
And she's just like a mushball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how did they make it this long? I don't know.
Who knows?
But they did. And the work we're doing is like she's sharing and he's learning how to listen and respond in an emotional way. And we make the work kind of enjoyable. Like we kind of can laugh. He can laugh at himself about it, and she can laugh at, I'm such an emotional wreck. My mascara's running, and he's like, and so it's like that patience, and it doesn't have to be stressful. It can be also fun to like see what the feelings come out of this guy with this macho guy. How does that sound to you? And it's good work. It takes time. And people can do it.
But there are people who are emotionally immature. I mean, they're stuck in their mind to the point that they laugh at these type of, like you say, mushy
Right.
feelings. Why are you in touch with your feelings? Why are you talking so much about?
What do you need them for?
What do you need it? I mean, move on and
We
just
didn't see
get.
this by our Zeta, you know?
Yeah, whatever it is, it's his defense mechanism, and you're not going to change. These are two different fabrics.
Right. Except if I want to have a happy marriage, then I have to learn to speak. If my wife speaks Chinese, I'm gonna have to learn to speak Chinese. And
Yeah, but
if he speaks Russian, I'm gonna have to learn to speak Russian, even though it's not my language
Right.
choice.
The question is if he is happy the way it is. He likes it his way.
Well, if he's happy, but she's not happy,
Correct.
is he really happy?
Yeah, or it's like it's not going to work. I mean, you're happy, but you're not living alone. You're living with somebody who was unhappy.
Right. So yeah. So it's tricky, but if two people are committed to each other, they can learn the other's language, and if it's an emotional language or even it's a tough guy language, sometimes people don't, and that's why there's a whole masechta of getting.
That's a huge problem.
I worked with a couple many years ago, and he was like, their Bali Tshuva Lubavitch, he was like a man's man, football, guns, and she was an artist, poet. And
looking at the stars.
Yeah, they came to me after they'd been to every other Rav and therapist, and you knew they didn't end up staying married, but like, okay, because they really were very, very, very different people.
What about severe cases? Like I'm talking about narcissistic personality disorder or different personality disorders. And, research shows that a narcissist will never change. They will never change because they don't have introspect. They actually like the way they are. Not they like, they're practically in Gehenna. They're in hell in their own lives. But they have no place for change. They have no place for change. They will go along with the ride with you if you want to come their way.
If you do it my way,
if you do it my way, we have a marriage. If you don't do it my way, then they have such grandiose views of themselves that even if you leave, I have nothing to lose. They're living in a different world. This is a severe, and the problem with this personality disorder is that on the outside they look perfect. They're actually very, successful sometimes and charming, and so it's extremely confusing for the spouse that on one hand he performs perfect, but on the other hand he is just a monster. He's just not here. Right. So how does a spouse deal with that? And sometimes there's even children involved.
Well, if he's perfect, there is, right?
Yeah.
And the children see through him too.
Yeah.
I mean, well, let's say it this way: the like I told you on the phone, DSM 3, 4, 5. We, if this current version of the DSM has it kind of all clustered together, but it used to be there were cluster B and access to these personality disorders, and these are things that don't change, like somebody's IQ. Like, if they have like cerebral palsy, that's just not going to change. Yeah. It. And if they have personality disorder, it's not going to change.
Not going to change.
However, if we look at it as a defense mechanism and a part, and sort of deal with them on that level, then I'm not dealing with a shtick son of a gun.
Right.
I'm dealing with this very, very fragile person's defense mechanism.
Right.
And then, okay, so that's what you need to protect yourself, right? And if they're a narcissist, there's no way I'm going to say it. But if I'm choosing to stay with this person, and lots of times people do because of kids,
there's
whatever
a lot
it
of
is.
Reasons, yeah.
There's a lot of reasons. Okay, I'm going to live in my reality while he lives in his reality or she lives in her reality. And I understand that this is how this person never has to protect themselves. And just because they say it doesn't make it true.
Right. So what you're saying is that the awareness comes first. First, you understand that this person has a personality disorder, and you don't hate the person for the person who he is. He has a certain defense mechanism that he put on, and you choose if you want to deal with this.
like if a person had like schizophrenia,
Right.
just because they tell me that there are little green aliens coming down,
Right.
doesn't mean I have to buy into it.
Oh, but here's the difference from schizophrenia. If someone is diagnosed with schizophrenia, let's say, the diagnosis, and there's sometimes medication that helps these people, and they can function like normal people. The problem with narcissistic personality disorder is that they are in and out. They are 7 weeks. They can be great, not great, super great, and then 7 weeks they're like losing it, and you're against the world because to the world they show a beautiful functioning. So it's crazy making.
Absolutely.
Kind of
right. And there's a lot of talk lately about narcissistic wounding.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. I mean, in terms of if you want to look at it, you want to see if you can see your parts. What am I being triggered about? What's coming up for me when he tells me it's his way or the highway? What does that feel like for me? And if I can be honest with myself, I can say, wait, no, I'm not okay with that. And then he says, well, if you're not okay with that, there's the door.
Right.
Well, okay, maybe.
Something to consider.
Yeah.
Which is not easy. It's easier said than done, but
So if I'm going to stay, then I'm going to say when he says that, I say, okay, Tzaddik, you need to be in charge today.
Right.
I need to stay married to you so we can marry off our kids, and you need to be in charge.
So what kind of living is that?
It's very hard. It's very hard living.
Difficult.
It's a hard way to go. Either if it's a narcissistic, if it's borderline, if it's, anything. And even if you want to make it, somebody with a severe anxiety disorder, it's a similar thing.
Right.
We're not gonna drive on the highway because you believe cars on the highway, explode all the time.
Right.
So I can either choose to never go anywhere with you, or I can choose to take the side roads. Take the side roads. So it's if I can be flexible and keep my eye on the prize,
right,
then I can handle it. It takes a lot of strong
resilience,
a strong sense of self. Doesn't mean that if I work on it, on myself and my reactions, that doesn't mean that I can't live with this person who 7 weeks is good, 7 weeks is bad, and maybe we can even make it 8 weeks good and 6 weeks bad. And then, just because the way I'm responding and reacting to the person.
Right.
When I buy his baloney,
right.
It gets worse.
It gets worse, right?
Right. When I stay
if you label it and you name it, the awareness is going to help you at least deal with it a little bit better.
Depending what goes along with that label. If the label is narcissists are evil, I can't, right? Or if it's he has a very, very, very strong fight part, and he really needs that because never.
Yeah.
So I'm not labeling it this big scary term.
Right.
I'm calling out the symptoms and labeling the symptoms as his dysfunction.
Correct.
Still, there's a term from Green, I forget his name, but he calls it multi-ultraviolet or something like that, where like I've read his book, but people tell me it's just he's like, oh no,
yeah,
right, I can't deal with, nobody can deal with this person.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that I have a title for it, name it to tame it, good, call it what you want, call it applesauce, but as long as you know that this is not a regular person, or this person is not in normal life brain or in regular state,
you don't get so hurt by it, and you don't get overtaken by it because you're aware of what is going on behind the scenes.
You see through it.
Now, talking about personality disorders, that's what they write, and that's what the research shows, that they can use a lot of times intimacy. They give, they hold back, they use it as a form of control. As a tool. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with a situation like that?
In a couple, if the couple,
correct,
then we say, you have to be clear what your expectations are, and you have to make rules for yourself, but not rules for the other person. What
does that mean?
So, researchers will also say that everybody who has an addiction also has a personality disorder, right? So, when it comes to betrayal, and a couple wants to heal from the betrayal. Like, okay, so he went and slept with everything that moved for, like, 6 years.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I guess I have to stay with him. That doesn't mean that she has to go to bed with the guy.
Right, because it's dangerous also, right?
Well, yeah, and let's assume he's clean, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And then he's going to say, she's using sex as a manipulation.
Correct.
And then we say, no, she's not. She just doesn't want to touch you because you're skeezy.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
To be safe also, yeah.
Yeah, he's, well, I'm safe. I got tested, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But it's for Ekeldick to know that you're dishonest. Why don't you work on your emotional intimacy? So that's one way, like, we, like, he's going to be in the right. He,
Right.
like it says in Svarim, she's a redis.
Right.
Which is a total misunderstanding of this. And she's not using. But then there are the other ways, right? If you go to bed with me, I'll pay for your car.
Correct.
Right, which is
control, yeah.
Which is all about that control. So she has to say, she has to be strong and say, I'm not your hooker.
Right.
That's not how it goes here. Right? It's like, if you want to have an intimate relationship with me, okay, let's work on intimacy. Let's work on intimacy in the kitchen first.
Right.
Then the living room.
Right.
Then the hallway.
Yeah.
The door to the bedroom,
Right.
and go very, very, very slow to rebuild that trust.
You also feel that if there's issues in intimacy, that is just the result of the foundation, and like you said, the living room and the kitchen and the hallway before. This is the last part. Is that true?
What I find when working with couples in betrayal healing, if we can restore the intimacy, the emotional intimacy, the bedroom stuff becomes super easy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to talk about how do you the lights on, lights off, right? Because we're already talking about, like, no, I really want what she wants, and she's saying, I really want what he wants, and so then at that point they're going to make love. They're not going to have sex, and that's an easy thing to do. It doesn't matter.
Right. It's natural.
It's just
You were saying before that everyone who has an addiction has a personality disorder. I would want to elaborate on that, but don't we all have addictions?
No.
Okay.
No, I hope not.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
No, because people say that everyone has a...
No, we may all have compulsions.
Right. Addictions means that you're completely out of control. It's taken over your life. That's what addiction... That's what
the way I kind of formulate it, the way I was taught to formulate it, is that addictions have to meet really 3 criteria, and it's about a relationship to a behavior or substance, and not necessarily the drug or the behavior. So it's my relationship to it. So let's take Gemara, right? Very part of addiction, right? You think, who could get addicted to Gemara? It happens.
Wow.
So if my relationship to the behavior or substance is compulsive, meaning like it sucks me up like a vacuum every time I see one, I gotta have it. I was working with a Gemara addict, and he kept losing jobs because
he was learning Gemara.
He was he worked in a Schita factory.
Yeah, but he was always with the cipher.
But his Gemara was open, he had a plastic over it, and he kept messing up the Schita because he's right? So it's compulsive. He can't say no. Loss of control. I meant to do it for just a little bit, and I had a lot. Right after davening, it was the old man's Bobby's yurtzeit, so we made l'chaim, or 2 or 3, I don't know. Right, I meant to just have a little, and then I have the cup, right, and it just grew, and then I'm using it, and this is important. I'm using it to manage my daily life problems, not my big problems like my budget. I'm using it just. My boss is a terror. If I just take a little thing on the way to work, I'll be
going to help me.
Good. And he's a bigger terror. Or the boss isn't a terror, but like I totally messed up the spreadsheet because I was high, right? So when you have those, you can check off compulsion, daily life problems, and loss of control is going to be progressive, and that's a really important part. If it's not really these things, it's not an addiction. Maybe a dysfunction and an unhealthy behavior and destructive behavior, but that doesn't make it an addiction.
Right. So let's say if someone is on the phone till 2 o'clock in the morning on TikTok or Instagram, that's a dysfunction, that is just compulsive.
Well, it's obviously out of control because who
Right.
wants to stare at that screen?
No, but I'm saying, you got to go to sleep, you got to get up tomorrow morning, but the phone just keeps you there.
Right,
You
so-
don't call it an addiction yet. It didn't spiral to that point that it just takes over your life, which means you're losing your job or stuff like
Right.
that.
If you remember in the way the DSM people talk about it, it's that there's like alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence, right? So dependence would be the addiction level,
Right.
and abuse would be. So I may be abusing,
Correct.
TikTok, but that
Right.
doesn't mean I'm a TikTok
Dependent on it.
junkie.
Right. So what are you saying about personality disorders? So that means that if a person finds himself being an addict, what kind of personality disorder would you say is?
Well, it could be any, but if you kind of roll it back, right? Addiction is a coping mechanism, dysfunctional coping mechanism. It's in the flight land, right?
Light
So-
part of
right.
the brain, yeah.
And personality disorder is also
Same idea.
trauma
Yeah,
response.
it's like a shidduch, these two.
it's a trauma response. So I'm using these trauma responses to manage my discomfort. Now we all could probably find ourselves in one of the personality disorders, is what those the personality disorder theorists talk about.
Right.
And it's just we're managing it and we're okay with it. But in in extreme situations, we would manifest one of those. That's what they say. So, so if I'm busy every day with my addiction, let's call it alcohol,
Right.
right? I'm also going to be in a really bad place. And then that latent personality dysfunction is going to rise up to the surface. And I'm not drunk. I know everything.
Right.
I could drive a car. Okay, narcissist, hit the wall. Enjoy, right? And it's just they kind of go hand in hand.
Right. Now, let me ask you a funny question. To sex addiction, is there a gateway? Which means there's like in drugs, they say this is a gateway drug. So let's say if a person just has a regular life, or he's not getting his needs met, or whatever the case is there a gateway that a person can turn into a sex addict?
Well, first of all, not getting needs met is already like you're standing in the Pesach Hashar.
At the borderline.
Yeah, that's just having that. But I would say that
But is there this is a reason for someone to
that's what people tell themselves.
Oh no! So I'm asking you, what is the reason?
Well, what people, let's say it like this: internet pornography, as we have it today,
Right.
is overwhelmingly addictive in its own. Like heroin draws the brain in and is addictive.
Correct.
Alcohol, very addictive. These substances are necessarily addictive because the way they act on the brain. Chocolate is a very addictive
Sugar.
substance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So internet pornography is absolutely the most addictive creation that we humans have come up with because it's multi-stimulating. Now you open your screen and there's three here, 4 there, pop-ups, and it's like, it's like this overstimulation.
Yeah.
And it's all for, it's like such brain candy
Right.
that the brain scans show that pre and post pornography, there's a erosion of the prefrontal cortex, that part that makes our decisions. So there's a physical destruction that's happening along with the the imagination stimulation, the physical stimulation, the visual stimulation, the audio stimulation, and like a high stimulated level. Think about it. Think about being a little kid and you get a toy. That's fun. Now think about being a kid and you're taking it into the toy store and you have all the toys.
Right. He's like, he doesn't know where to start.
Right, exactly.
Wow. So that is something else. And what are the lies that these people tell themselves? When someone is never, he fell into the sex addiction thing, and he's deep in it. But how does he talk himself? What are the lies that they tell themselves and say? They play it down.
I've heard some of the craziest stuff.
What did you hear?
I've heard some of the you want to hear crazy stuff?
Yeah.
A super functional guy, very super functional. Was he a narcissist? At times, yeah. But he's super functional, making big money, his best marriage ever, loves his kids, he's the best father ever. And he goes to, the Asian massage parlors, wink, wink.
No.
And I said, I thought you had a great marriage. Yeah, but just because my wife made me supper doesn't mean I can't go out to eat afterwards. I said, are you out of your mind? What she doesn't know doesn't hurt her. Are you out of your mind? Like
Right.
you actually think that it's okay? And it took.
But what is behind it? Was he not satisfied?
He was satisfied, but he wanted more. Like
An
like your
overindulgence.
your wife made you a good supper, and then you went to Muncie Takeout for a pastrami sandwich.
Right.
What's the shala?
Right.
And it's like, and he can tell himself that he still has a good marriage, and his wife doesn't know.
Yeah, as long as he keeps it quiet, then he doesn't see anything wrong with it.
And then you start to ask, a little deeper, ask him to go a little deeper, and he's like, oh wait, I guess she kind of probably feels it that I don't really care about, because I can get it somewhere else.
Right.
So that's one of the lies. Another lie is she cares about me. Could you believe it? Right? She's on the screen. She's
but he has a
she could be dead.
blown relationship with the screen, like he's fully in there.
She cares about me. Or, one person, and he was sure every day he'd come home from the city on the bus and he would tell me about, I was sure that this woman, she wanted to have my babies. Like, I had to hold myself
100%,
back.
100%.
100%. I know.
But what is this, fantasy world? What is it?
It's
but
all.
they believe it.
Damn it, they believe it. I mean, our brains, we all live in our own magical kingdom.
Right.
And so some people's magical kingdom are a little bit more magical.
Yeah. Wow. Now, my question is, for a person who examined his life and he took a good look at himself and he feels his life spiraled out of control, what's his first step? Where does a person start who wants to go for help?
Right. So, there are good agencies to call, like a Mudim or Relief.
Mm-hmm.
Those are good agencies to
They
call.
would refer professionals, but you recommend them to go sit down with the person? I mean, again, this is a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage and there's a lot of shame that needs to be pushed to the side.
A lot.
But you need somebody to help you out.
Yeah, to do this, to get out of sex addiction or any addiction alone it's
very hard.
It's so hard. So hard.
Now, as far as spirituality, I know that the 12-step program is used, and this is one piece of spirituality. Mm-hmm. What's your take on in recovery? For Ingeman, that we were talking about all these stories that you shared over here, and as far as connecting to the Rabbeinu Shalom, what's your take on bringing in the Rabbeinu Shalom into your life to fulfill what's really that void, that and including trauma? I wonder if trauma, like we said before, this is something that he didn't take it by himself. He just didn't know how to deal with it. But if he brings in spirituality and Yiddishkeit and knowing that Rabbeinu Shalom, how would that help him?
It's a loaded question. How much time do we have?
Let's make it as quick as possible.
Let me see if I can sum it up. If my trauma happens to be spiritual trauma, religious trauma, like I got beat over the head with this God thing, with the Bashefer,
right?
And all my understanding is that Bashefer is this evil thing looking to zap me if I step out of line.
Correct.
I have to get rid of that avodah zarah, and I have to embrace an emes Yiddishkeit, not a falsche like Yiddishkeit that my sick, twisted, Kita Gimel Rebbe lives with. I guess it's not helping him because he keeps beating the crap out of all the kids. Right. So I need to find, without a spiritual connection, humans across the board struggle, and it
that is a fact.
Yeah, but if people are looking for something, greater than themselves, they will find it if they can be emistic. Now, if I'm talking about somebody who's grown up from, it's very, very hard to get rid of the bad stuff without getting rid of the good stuff. So a lot of times people will go into recovery and drop religion completely. Yeah. But it says in the big book on AAS towards the end that what the AA people found is that more often people become better as a result, and more often long-term, sticking with program, friars, OTDs will become from maybe not like their tattoo was,
Right.
but they will become more emistic with their relationship to their Rebbeinu Shalom, and that's essential. And that's absolutely essential. And unfortunately, a lot of times in the From 12-step groups, they skip quickly over 2 and 3. Steps 2 and 3 are the parts that deal with higher power and bring it into your life.
But that is the most important part.
Absolutely. I scream about it, but oftentimes they want to go through the steps quicker, and that's a very, very loaded question. If I grew up, tortured.
Right. Yeah.
And it's going to be very, very, it's a lot of work to let go of like the Avodah Zarah and embrace their Rebbeinu Shalom. I just had a conversation with Ingerman yesterday. It was today? No, Monday. About, like I was just telling him basic concepts of Hasidus. And he never heard of it. And he grew up in KJ.
It was never taught.
He's like, you mean, like, he was like in tears that like there's a place for him in Yiddishkeit.
A beautiful, gorgeous place that you can feel so loved and so connected that is just...
Because you did one Avera doesn't make you a guy. Right? You don't have to shegitz you, and that's where the shame comes in, right? And if I'm a shegitz, how well do you think I'm going to learn in the morning shir? First, I'm missing fartuks for sure.
Right.
And then how's my morning seder going to look?
It's a downward spiral from there. And what happens if trauma was not, religious trauma? It was more of like a divorce or losing a parent or some other type of trauma.
It's easier. I mean, it is easier because, if the attachment figure could even be God, then that's okay because I know God's still there. God cares about me. God loves me. And they're here, they're there. But also ultimately tshuva is built into the system. That's a solid attachment figure.
Right. Tzvi, let me tell you something. This was powerful stuff.
Good.
It was good stuff. We had a good conversation. I just want to thank you for showing up.
My pleasure.
I want to thank you for showing up with honesty and with compassion. And for the few good tools that you gave that someone could take home a little bit, so maybe they can learn something. Because let's face it, marriage is not peaches and cream.
No.
It's not Instagram photos, right?
Definitely not.
The bottom line is that what I took out from this, that the struggle is real and there is no need for shame. It is okay to have struggles.
It's okay to struggle. Yeah.
It's okay to struggle, and you just have to, become aware and deal with it. Put one foot in front of the other, and just trailblaze.
I mean, it's embrace the struggle. Embrace it and show up to it, and then it'll be something that's part of your, something that grows you instead of crushes you.
Thank you again. Thank you for coming. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.